Have you ever been reading the Bible? You finish the last page of the Old Testament, you flip over to Matthew in the New, and you just get this feeling of whiplash? It feels like a completely different planet. One minute you're in a world where everyone's speaking Hebrew, they're under Persian rule, the big problem is idolatry. And then boom, suddenly the language is Greek, the Roman Empire is in charge, and everyone's obsessed with the idea of resurrection. How in the world did we get from A to B? Well, that gap is filled by 400 of the most chaotic and world-changing years in history.
I mean, the jump is it's jarring, right? Because these two worlds are so different. The Old Testament world, that's shaped by memories of empires like Assyria and Babylon. The whole struggle is about national survival and just staying faithful to God while living under the Persians. But then you get to the New Testament and suddenly, Rome is the only superpower that matters. Greek is the language everyone speaks. And the big theological question isn't about idols anymore, it's about life after death, an idea you barely even see in the Old Testament.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? What on earth happened in those 400 or so years that separate these two books? This period, which people often call the 400 silent years, is the absolute key to understanding how one world completely morphed into the other. But here's the thing. As historian Dr. Anthony Tomasino puts it, calling these years silent could not be more wrong. This period was anything but quiet. It was explosive, it was messy, and it was the foundational era that set the stage for the world Jesus was born into. This wasn't a gap in the story. It was the bridge.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to rewind. We have to start where the Old Testament story leaves off, with Judea under the rule of the massive Persian Empire. So after that devastating Babylonian exile, the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, actually let the Jewish people return home to Jerusalem. And under the Persians, who were actually pretty tolerant for the time, they got to rebuild their society. They finished the Second Temple in 515 BC, and around 445 BC, they rebuilt the city walls. All things considered, it was a time of recovery, of relative peace and stability. But all that peace and quiet, well, it wasn't going to last. A new force was exploding out of the West, and it was about to change literally everything. And the name of that force? Alexander the Great. In just a handful of years, this Macedonian genius just blazed across the ancient world, completely redrawing the map as he went.
You see, Alexander's conquest wasn't just military, it was cultural. He brought this tidal wave of Hellenism, Greek culture, with him. Greek became the common language for business and government, which, by the way, is exactly why the New Testament was written in Greek and not Hebrew. After Alexander died, his empire shattered, and little Judea found itself stuck in the middle of a brutal tug-of-war between two of the successor Greek kingdoms, the Ptolemies down in Egypt and the Seleucids up in Syria. And it's right here, under one of those Greek kingdoms, the Seleucids, that the Jewish people were pushed to their absolute breaking point. This sparked a desperate fight for their very survival. The bad guy in this chapter of the story is the Seleucid king, Antiochus Epiphanes. And this guy, he wasn't happy just ruling. He decided the Jewish religion itself was a problem, and he was going to stamp it out. He outlawed their core religious practices. He marched into the temple in Jerusalem and desecrated it. He tried to force them to worship Greek gods. This wasn't just oppression. It was an attempt at cultural annihilation. So, what do you do when you're faced with an existential threat like that? You fight back. In 1670 BC, a family of priests, who we now know as the Hasmoneans, led a massive rebellion. The Maccabean revolt was a gritty, brutal guerrilla war fought for the basic freedom to worship their god. And here's the crazy part. Against all odds, they won. And that incredible victory led to this moment, 140 BC. For the first time since Babylon had crushed them more than 400 years earlier, the Jewish people had formal political independence. You can't overstate how huge this was. The Book of Maccabees captures the feeling of the time perfectly. They were finally freed from the yoke of the Gentiles. They had their own kings again, their own army. They were in control of their own destiny. And that memory, that powerful memory of recent, hard-won freedom, would be burned into their national soul. But, and you knew there was a but coming, this independence, sadly, wasn't built to last. A new power, more organized and more relentless than any before it, was rising in the West. The real tragedy here is that the Hasmonean kingdom was weakened from the inside. The descendants of those heroic rebels, well, they started fighting among themselves over power. This internal squabbling created a power vacuum, and it was basically a wide-open invitation for Rome to come knocking. And in 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey did just that.
He marched his legions right into Jerusalem. And just like that, the brief, century-long dream of Jewish independence was over. Judea was now just another province of the Roman Empire. If you step back, you can see this really interesting pattern emerging. Think about the empires that had ruled them. The Assyrians and Babylonians, they were from nearby Mesopotamia. The Persians, a bit further away, a bit more different. The Greeks, now they were really culturally alien. But the Romans, with their capital way over in Italy, they were the most remote, the most foreign overlord they had ever had. That feeling of being occupied by a truly strange alien power was at an all-time high. So, all these chaotic pieces, the Greek cultural wave, that heroic rebellion, the short taste of freedom, and the final Roman boot, they all come together to set the very specific stage for the New Testament. And the guy who bridges this gap right into the Gospels is Herod the Great. He was this incredibly ambitious and totally ruthless political operator who was put on the throne by Rome as a client king. He's the one ruling Judea when Jesus is born, a constant, living reminder of who is really in charge. Okay, so here's the bottom line. The world of the New Testament is basically a pressure cooker. You've got Roman soldiers on every street corner, you've got a Roman puppet king on the throne, but you've also got this fresh, powerful memory of what it felt like to be free. And because of all that persecution under the Greeks, a powerful hope in resurrection, this belief that God would make things right for his faithful people, even after death, had become a white-hot center of their faith. So in the end, were those 400 years silent? Absolutely not. They were loud, they were violent, and they were completely transformative. They weren't a gap in the story. They were the story that explains how the world of the Old Testament became the world of the New. And that leaves us with one last thought. For people living under a foreign superpower, with a fresh memory of violent rebellion and glorious independence, and a burning hope for God's justice, what kind of Messiah, what kind of deliverer were they so desperately waiting for?